were preparing a meal for the family to come and share. And as they had always done, when they put the ham in the roaster, they cut two ends off it and put them away in the refrigerator. And they got talking, why do we cut the ends off? Well, you know, Mom always did. She says it was because it made the taste come out more. The basting, it helped with the basting. And then the family arrived and they ate, and over dinner, one of the sisters said to the mom, "How come you always cut the ends off the ham before you put it in the roasting pan?" And she said, "Oh, well, we had a really small roasting pan, so we had to cut the ends off all the time." It's a bit like the church that way. We've kept doing a lot of things because we used to do it, and we don't really even need to anymore. The interesting thing to me about that story is I'll bet you that one of the sisters stopped cutting the ends off and the other one kept doing it anyway. After our meeting here on Tuesday morning, we gathered churches from around the region to talk about how we might have ministry together given the circumstances that we're faced as churches, being fairly isolated, having a hard time attracting full-time leadership or affording it, shrinking congregations. And what struck me is there were people there in that room who were going to keep cutting the ends off the ham and hoping that it would make a difference. And there were other people who didn't know what the changes we needed to make were, but were clear they were going to be part of making those changes. We are at a time in the church where change is inevitable. It's not a question of whether there will be change or not. The only real question is, will we be part of it? And I wanted to begin there because one of the things that happened, I emailed the announcement out from the board about they were going to stick with 10:30 for worship time instead of 11. And, that I mentioned that I thought it might be good small practice to prepare us for many changes that might be coming. And I got a couple of emails back saying, "What kind of changes? Isn't this enough?" I'm like, oh my goodness. 10:30 to 11 is not even the neighborhood of the kind of changes we're going to be faced as a church. For starters, within 10 years, 50% of the United Church ministers will be retired, including me. Wow. And there are not new ministers coming in to replace the ones that are leaving. And that may or may not be a problem because the congregations are also shrinking and closing at an alarming rate. We struggle with the number of, the amount of making our budgets, the number of people in church. Within the church, those challenges there. Another change that's clearly going to happen is there are now more women ministers in the United Church than men. And women will bring their understanding of what it means to be a community of faith to the mix in a new way. Changes are happening, and that's just within the church. If we look beyond the church, outside of the church, we will hear things like, "I don't really trust Christians anymore. Religion is the problem in all of everything in the world. It's caused all the difficulties, and if we got rid of it, it would be better." That you can't be a thinking person and a religious person. There are all sorts of challenges that surround us that will necessitate change to an institution that evolved out of Western European colonial work. And, the way our buildings are, the way we worship, the things that we do are shaped by those realities. And I wrote down a quote that someone told me about our potluck church on Friday night. This is from the Delhi Llama. "I am increasingly convinced that the time has come to find a way of thinking about spirituality and ethics beyond religion." That's the Delhi Llama, the head of one of the largest religious organizations in the world. He understands that change is coming. And another interesting part about that is he posted it on Facebook, where he has a lot of followers. The Dalai Lama understands that there are going to be changes, and that that's part of life, and the reality that we live in is change. We experience it as individuals. I like to think I haven't changed a bit since I was 27. But then I had hair then. If I fell down, I got up quickly. I could hear and see better than I can now. Whether I want it or not, change happens. So that's the context that we hear the story today. Jesus with his disciples, and he says, who do people think I am? And they say, oh, Elijah, Moses, you know. He says, who do you say that I am? And Peter got it right. Peter said, you are the Christ, the Messiah. Now those words have taken all kinds of meaning since that time, but what they mean is you are the anointed liberator. You are the one who will set us free. And Jesus says, well, don't tell anybody about it. Because he knows that they understand the liberation to be a military one, to throw off the power of the Roman Empire over the Jewish people. And he immediately says, don't tell anyone, we're headed for Jerusalem now, where I will suffer, I will be put to death, and I'll rise in 3 days. And then Peter gets it wrong. He says, no, don't, that can't happen. That's not how the Messiah works. That's not the kind of change we're looking for. And then Jesus says the famous, get behind me, Satan. One of the harshest words Jesus uses in the Bible are for Peter, who gets that so wrong. And he goes on to teach that anyone who wants to save their life, anyone who wants to experience the liberation of the Messiah must bear a cross, must give up their life to find it. Anyone who clings to their life will lose it. Anyone who is not willing to risk it all will not find the kind of freedom that Jesus is calling us to, both as individuals and as communities. This summer, at the end of the summer, I haven't been able to do it for a few years. Naomi and I used to have our annual hike to the suspension bridge in Puckasaw Park. And I had torn a muscle in my calf, speaking of having changed, and wasn't able to do it for a couple of years, just trying to get myself back in shape that way. But we went this summer, and I made it, and I felt good, and I was thrilled. But the part I want to tell you about is we began walking through the prescribed burn. Some of you will remember back in the spring that they burned, a couple of hectares maybe, of forest at the beginning of the coastal hiking trail. And you could see it from the kiosk, and you could walk to it very easily from the visitor's center. And we went out to see it right away after, and it was just completely black. A few tall stands still standing there, but scorched black, not a possibility of life. And yet only in a few months later, as we walked through, there was this growth there. It was incredible. Shrubs had come back. There was greenness. Sure, the blackened stands of spruce poles were still there, but life was returning in a new way. And we know that certain seeds can only be opened through the heat of a forest fire, that certain plants return more quickly after it's been burned down. Remember the White River forest fire? And how everyone drove out there to pick blueberries the next year? And how fantastic they were? Was only possible by burning down what was there. It's only possible in that way. Now, most of us are not prepared to burn down our lives, to do something so dramatic. We don't have that kind of courage a lot of times. But there are times in our lives where we have to put it on the line. Times in our lives where, as Jesus said, we need to risk everything for his sake and for the sake of the gospel. Not because we need to feel bad or, humbled by it, but because that is the path to the liberation that Jesus brings. It's the willingness to risk those things that are precious, most precious to us. It's a little bit like, there's been a phenomenon, there's something in the air in Marathon these days of decluttering. I cannot tell you the number of people who've said to me, I'm decluttering these days. I'm getting this stuff out of my house that I don't use anymore. You know, and I heard 2 conversations like that. I came home and Pearl had a pile of stuff by the front door. I'm thinking, what's going on? And then I turned on CBC radio, and the radio noon conversation was about decluttering your house. And there's so many people who have used that term, and around here at the church, oh, we've just been having a grand time running stuff to the dump and getting rid of it. And it feels good. It feels good. Clearing out space, letting go of things that we've hung on to too long. And in that space, there is room for that liberation that God calls us to and that Jesus promises for us. I can't tell you as individuals in your spiritual life what it is you might be clinging to and need to let go of. You know whether it's a grudge or whether it's a relationship or whether it's just a way of looking at the world. I don't know what it is for you, but I do know that our liberation in Christ is tied up with our willingness to let go of some of those things. And they're usually things that we think we couldn't possibly. The same can be said for the church. Change is coming, and it's not about willy-nilly running around making changes frantically, trying to fix things. It's about clearing out space by letting go of some of the things that feel really precious to us. It's about making space for something new to happen, for God's Spirit to do something new among us, to risk those things in the name of the gospel, in the name of Christ. I wanted to share one other quote with you this morning. It's from Evelyn Underhill, and it's from her 1911 book called On Mysticism. She says, the true rule of poverty, and Underhill believes that the path is always a downward path toward poverty of spirit. The true rule of poverty consists of giving up those things that enchain the spirit, divide its interest, and deflects it on its road to God. Our vision statement is that we are journeying together in the way of Jesus. And the way Jesus says, his way, is the way of letting go, of taking risks, of clearing space, to imagine new ways for God to be at work in us and in the world. Amen.